My parents refused to come to my wedding because I married before my perfect sister. They ignored every invitation, denied ever receiving them even after I showed them proof. But it wasn't until my Aunt Janice stood up at a family brunch, looked my parents in the eye, and said Madeline was erased by her own family that everything began to unravel. Hi, I'm Madeline. And this is the story of how I finally stopped being the quiet daughter. It was a warm September afternoon in Woodinville, Washington, the kind of late summer day where sunlight filters through the leaves and everything feels just a little softer. Our wedding ceremony was held in a quiet garden tucked behind an old winery surrounded by lavender bushes and white folding chairs. Ethan stood beside me, his hand gently resting in mine, his eyes full of calm and pride. Everything about that moment should have felt complete, and it did almost. Except for the 2 empty seats in the front row. They were meant for my parents. I had hoped even up until the last minute that they'd change their minds. That maybe they would pull into the gravel parking lot just as the music started and someone would rush down the aisle whispering, "They're here." But the seats stayed vacant, untouched, as if they had been reserved for ghosts. I remember standing at the edge of the aisle, bouquet in hand, when I saw the empty chairs. My breath caught in my throat for a second, but I smiled anyway. I had spent years mastering that smile, the one that could hide disappointment so well that even I believed it sometimes. Ethan must have noticed. As we stood there exchanging vows, his thumb brushed across the back of my hand in small, steady circles. It was his way of saying "I see you" without interrupting a thing. When the officiant said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the garden erupted in cheers. My mother-in-law, Linda, wiped tears from her eyes as she clapped. She had been my anchor throughout the planning process, filling in the gaps my own mother had left behind. It was Linda who had helped me pick my dress, who had brought me tea when I stayed up late finalizing the guest list, who held my hand when the RSVP deadline passed, and my parents still hadn't responded. The reception was held on the same property beneath string lights and a tent draped in soft cream fabric. The tables were decorated with sunflowers and eucalyptus, a nod to Ethan's home state of Kansas and my love for simplicity. People laughed, toasted, danced. But when the DJ called for the father-daughter dance, the air shifted. I had told the DJ ahead of time to skip that part, but I guess it was part of the script and he had forgotten. He stood there awkwardly with the mic until Linda stepped forward. She placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "I'll dance with you, sweetheart, if that's okay." I nodded. And so under those glowing lights, I danced with my mother-in-law to a soft acoustic version of Landslide. It was sweet and kind and more than I ever expected, but not what I had dreamed of since I was a little girl spinning in my bedroom in a white pillowcase veil. Later that night, after the cake had been cut and the sparklers had fizzled out, I found a quiet spot at the edge of the garden. Ethan found me sitting there barefoot in the grass, holding my shoes in my lap. "You okay?" he asked, crouching beside me. I nodded, then shook my head. "I don't know. I think I'm just trying not to feel what I'm feeling." He sat down next to me, not saying anything for a moment. His arm wrapped around my shoulder, pulling me into his side. "It's okay to be hurt, Maddie," he said quietly. "You don't have to pretend." I rested my head on his shoulder. I kept thinking they'd show up. Even as I walked down the aisle. Even during the vows. Some part of me thought they couldn't actually go through with it. Ethan didn't speak right away. Then he said, "I know. I saw your mom open the invitation. I saw the read receipt." I looked at him. "You never told me that. I didn't want to ruin it for you. I thought maybe they'd surprise you. But they didn't." "No," he said. "They didn't." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The scent of lavender and dry grass filled the air. They knew it was today. They knew where to go. And they still didn't come. And that was the truth of it. Not a misunderstanding, not a scheduling error, not lost mail or confusion. They had made a choice. That night, as Ethan and I left the venue hand in hand, I glanced one last time at the garden where we'd said our vows. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Just tired. Confused. A little hollow. And slowly, the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for weeks moved to the front. Why? Why would my parents refuse to come to my wedding? And what did it really say about the kind of family we were? Sabrina was the kind of kid teachers talked about in the teacher's lounge. Even in elementary school, her name was always on a bulletin board somewhere. First place in the regional spelling bee blue ribbon at the science fair solo in the winter recital. She had this shine to her, a presence that drew people in without her even trying. I used to think she was born with some invisible spotlight that followed her everywhere. By the time she got to high school, she was class president, cheer captain, homecoming queen. Tall, elegant, with these honey blonde curls that somehow never frizzed even in Seattle rain. People noticed her. People remembered her. Meanwhile, I was the girl who turned in her homework on time, who knew how to fix the printer in the library, who sat in the back of the class, with her hair in a messy bun and her head in a JavaScript tutorial. Our parents adored her. My mom would light up when Sabrina walked into a room, standing a little straighter, speaking with more energy, like Sabrina's presence pulled the best out of her. When I won the regional math competition in 9th grade, Mom said, "That's great, sweetie," then asked if I could help Sabrina with her campaign posters for class president. When Sabrina got into Stanford on a merit scholarship, they threw a dinner party. Not just a cake or takeout celebration. A full-blown catered event at a rooftop restaurant downtown. I remember watching her give a toast that night, her voice smooth, her confidence effortless as relatives clapped, and my mom wiped away a proud tear. A year later, when I got my acceptance letter to the University of Washington's engineering program, I told them over dinner one night while we were eating leftovers. My dad nodded. My mom said, "That's nice, Maddie," and asked if I'd remembered to RSVP to Sabrina's graduation ceremony. She used to say things like, "Sabrina shines, you're solid. Both matter." I used to tell myself that was her version of being fair. But in the years that followed, I began to understand that to them shining was what really counted. Solid just meant invisible. I don't think Sabrina meant to outshine me at first. As kids, we were close in that way sisters are when the world is still small and sleepovers happen in the same room. But even then I knew I wasn't the favorite. When I broke my arm at 8, Mom stayed at the hospital for a few hours before leaving to make Sabrina's ballet recital. She told me not to cry. "You're tough, Maddie. Sabrina needs me right now." I watched her leave with my arm in a sling and a coloring book on my lap. I remember the nurse being kinder than my own mother that day. Sabrina started modeling during college. It wasn't even something she was pursuing seriously at first. Some guy at a music festival told her she should try it, and within a few months, she had an agent and her face on a billboard for a local skincare brand. Mom printed out that ad and framed it. It still hangs in their living room above the fireplace. The same year that photo went up, I had just completed my internship at a software startup that would later go public. When I told my parents, Mom said that's good experience and asked if I had any recent photos of Sabrina from the shoot. I stopped bringing my wins to them after a while. It wasn't worth the emptiness that followed. I remember once during a family barbecue, one of my uncles asked what I was working on. Before I could answer, my mom interrupted to say she's doing something with computers, and then turned to tell everyone that Sabrina had been promoted at her firm in San Francisco. I was 28 when I finally stopped trying. Stopped competing. Stopped hoping. I had built a life for myself in Seattle. A small apartment with bookshelves I assembled on my own, a cat named Olive who slept curled on my laptop, and a job I genuinely enjoyed. The people I worked with respected me. My manager asked for my input during sprint reviews. I led 2 successful launches. I earned a spot at the annual Women in Tech conference. And that's where I met Ethan. It wasn't flashy. No instant fireworks. Just a quiet conversation over coffee, then another and another. He liked the way I thought. The way I challenged ideas. The way I carried myself when I didn't think anyone was watching. He never once compared me to anyone else. Never tried to mold me into anything I wasn't. He used to say, "You're my favorite puzzle. Smart, tricky, and worth the time." He made me feel seen. In a way my family never had. When he proposed, it was on our couch during a thunderstorm with Indian takeout between us and our favorite show playing in the background. He pulled out a ring I didn't know he'd been saving and asked if we could keep building this quiet, solid life together. I said yes without thinking. And then came the part I dreaded more than anything. telling my parents. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't even expect a phone call. But I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me this time. Maybe they'd be happy for me. Instead, when I told them, there was a long silence on the line. Then my mom said, "Are you sure this isn't a little rushed, Maddie? Maybe you should wait, focus on your health a bit before the wedding." That was it. No congratulations. No questions about Ethan, just judgment. And from that moment, I knew. This wasn't going to be the joyful family celebration I had hoped for, but I still didn't know how far they were willing to go. The day I told them I was engaged, I had just gotten off a long shift at work. Ethan had made dinner, something simple, pasta with roasted vegetables, and we sat together going over potential dates, laughing about how terrible we both were at narrowing down venues. He kept talking about this small vineyard on Bainbridge Island that he'd found, and I loved how excited he was, how involved he wanted to be in every part of the process. After we cleared the dishes, I called my parents. It was early evening, and I figured they'd both be home. My mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright at first, the way it always was when she didn't know who was calling yet. When I told her the news, she was silent. I waited, hoping maybe she was just shocked, or maybe tearing up happy for me in her own quiet way. But instead she said, "Are you sure this isn't too fast, Maddie? You've been comfortable for a while now. That doesn't mean you have to settle." Settle. The word sat heavy in my chest. I heard my dad in the background asking what the call was about. She covered the phone slightly, but not well enough. "Maddie's getting married," she said flatly. Then, after a beat, she added, "I thought Sabrina would go first." That part wasn't even meant for me to hear, I think, but I did. I ended the call not long after, trying to sound cheerful, thanking her for listening, for her input. She didn't ask about Ethan. She didn't ask when or where. There was no excitement. Just that undercurrent of disappointment I had grown so used to, now thinly veiled as concern. I didn't tell Ethan everything that night. Just that they had taken the news. Quietly. He didn't press. He never did when he saw I wasn't ready to talk. Instead, he poured me a glass of wine and suggested we look at photos of cake tastings online to cheer me up. A few weeks later, we held a small engagement party at a friend's rooftop apartment in Capitol Hill. It was low-key warm, filled with laughter and friends and string lights that swayed gently in the breeze. Ethan's parents flew in from Topeka and brought a framed photo of us from our first Christmas together. Linda toasted us, her eyes glassy as she described how she had always wanted a daughter and now felt like she finally had one. My parents came late. They didn't bring a gift. My mom hugged me without making eye contact. My dad gave Ethan a firm handshake but said nothing. They spent most of the party in the corner, hunched over my mom's phone, whispering. Ethan noticed it before I did. He kept glancing toward them with that polite but puzzled expression he used when something didn't quite sit right. At one point, he leaned in and said softly, "I think they're on the phone with your sister." I followed his gaze and watched as my mom tapped the screen, held it to her ear again, and whispered, "We didn't expect this. It's not how we pictured things." Later, Ethan told me that he overheard my mom saying, "This wasn't the plan. She's not supposed to go first." I didn't ask what else he had heard. I didn't want to know. The phrase stuck with me, though. This wasn't the plan. Like they had mapped out our lives in a specific order and I had somehow broken the sequence. Like I had taken something that didn't belong to me. For weeks after that party, my mom called me with unsolicited suggestions. Not for my wedding, but for Sabrina's. She sent me Pinterest boards filled with themes, dresses, and floral arrangements, all clearly curated with Sabrina in mind. One time she texted, "Just a thought, wouldn't it be lovely if Sabrina had a coastal wedding? She's always loved caramel." Sabrina wasn't even engaged. I would have laughed if it hadn't stung so badly. When I finally told my mom we had booked the vineyard on Bainbridge Island, she responded with, "Oh, that's nice. Very simple. That suits you." When I told her I'd chosen an A-line gown with lace sleeves, one that made me feel radiant and beautiful, she paused, then said, "At least it's practical. That shape should be flattering." Not once did she ask to see a photo. Not once did she offer to go with me to a fitting. Ethan's mom came instead. Linda teared up the moment I stepped out of the dressing room in that gown. She hugged me and whispered, "You look like you. That's the most important thing." I didn't cry until I got home. Not because I was sad, but because someone finally said the thing I had been craving my whole life. You look like you. Not better. Not more like your sister. Not thinner or softer or more graceful. Just me. We finalized our guest list a month before the wedding. I double-checked every name, every address. Ethan made sure the digital invites had red receipts turned on. My parents' names were there. Their RSVP was not. I sent a follow-up email. Then a text. Then another. Nothing. At first I thought maybe they were waiting. Maybe they wanted to make an entrance. Or maybe deep down they still didn't approve and were trying to find a way out without saying it aloud. One night I asked Ethan if he thought they'd come. He hesitated, then said, "I think they want Sabrina to go first." I said nothing. Because I already knew. There was a time when I still held out hope. When I believed that if I just worked a little harder, achieved a little more, maybe they would notice. Maybe they would say they were proud of me. I clung to that belief longer than I should have. I was 25 when I won the Rising Innovator Award from the Pacific Northwest Engineering Guild. It wasn't flashy like a modeling contract or a glossy magazine spread, but it was something I had earned. I had spent a year leading a team through a challenging project, and my name was printed in the program next to women I had admired for years. I invited my parents to the award ceremony, emailed them the details, even reminded them the week before. They didn't come. That same weekend, Sabrina had a photo shoot in Los Angeles. Some lifestyle brand had booked her for a campaign, and my mom had flown down with her to help pick accessories. She texted me a picture of the hotel room they were staying in, complete with a view of the Hollywood Hills, and added, "Hope your event goes well, honey. Sabrina sends love." I remember staring at that message in the dressing room backstage, holding my award certificate in one hand and trying not to cry before going on stage. One of the senior engineers patted me on the shoulder and said, "You've got this, kid." In that moment, I believed him more than I believed anything my family had ever told me. A year before that, when I graduated with my master's, we had a shared celebration scheduled for both me and Sabrina. She was being honored for landing a senior role at a San Francisco firm, and I had just defended my thesis with distinction. We agreed on a family dinner at a seafood place downtown, somewhere casual. But the moment we arrived, everything centered around Sabrina. The balloons read, "Congrats, Sabrina." The slideshow my mom played from her iPad was all modeling photos and magazine features. There was one slide with my name in small font next to a stock image of a graduation cap. During the dinner, my mom raised her glass and said, "Let's toast to Sabrina. To beauty and brains and everything in between." No one mentioned my degree. No one asked about my work. When I brought it up later, just me and mom in the kitchen, she said, "Well, you've always been so low maintenance about this kind of thing. I didn't think you'd mind. And besides, it's not about competition, Maddie. You're doing okay, but Sabrina, now that's our superstar." She said it like a compliment, as if being okay was something to aspire to. After that, I stopped inviting them to things, promotions, panels, conferences. I shared the news with Ethan and my closest friends. I let Linda take me out to celebrate when my startup stock finally vested and I bought my first car outright. I created a new kind of family around me, one that didn't measure worth in spotlight or sparkle. But even with all that distance, there were moments that brought it all rushing back. Like the Thanksgiving dinner at my aunt's house the year I turned 30. I had just finished speaking at a tech summit and flown back the same day, exhausted but proud. As we sat around the table passing mashed potatoes, someone asked what I'd been up to lately. Before I could answer, my mom jumped in and said, "Maddie's doing fine. She's working with computers." But did you know Sabrina just got offered a brand partnership with a wellness brand in Napa? All eyes turned to Sabrina, who smiled like it was her birthday. I pushed a piece of turkey around my plate and said nothing. Ethan squeezed my knee under the table. After dinner, he asked me in the car why I hadn't said anything. Why I let her interrupt. "Because what's the point?" I said. "I've said things before, it never changes." He looked over at me. "It hurts though, doesn't it?" I nodded. "Not in the way it used to. but yeah, it still does. It wasn't just the big things either. It was the tiny cuts that added up over time. The way my mom always mentioned how flattering Sabrina's dress was but never complimented mine. The way my dad introduced me to his friends as Maddie our quiet one, and introduced Sabrina as, "This is our daughter Sabrina, the model/marketing genius." It wasn't jealousy, it was erasure. Being constantly compared to someone who was born with all the right traits while I was expected to play support, and worse, being told I should be grateful for it. That I was lucky not to be in the spotlight. That I was more stable, more grounded. I used to believe that maybe they did love me. Just differently. Just more quietly. But love shouldn't feel like something you have to earn. It shouldn't feel like something that only comes when you're useful or silent or small. By the time Ethan and I started wedding planning, I had already made peace with most of that, or at least I thought I had. Until they refused to show up. And I realized some wounds only stay quiet until they're reopened. We mailed the invitations in early May. Ethan had picked out a minimalist design cream cardstock with soft green accents and delicate vines curling around the edges. I had spent hours typing every guest's name by hand, triple-checking the addresses. We even created a matching digital version complete with RSVP tracking and read receipts just in case someone misplaced the physical copy. My parents were at the top of the list. Their printed invite was hand-delivered through certified mail. The email version was opened within 48 hours. I saw the timestamp. Tuesday at 6:47 p.m. And yet weeks passed. No RSVP. No phone call. Not even a text acknowledging the invitation. At first, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were traveling. Maybe the email slipped through or the envelope got buried under magazines. But when I called to follow up, my mother answered and said they were still checking their calendar. It was June. The wedding was in late September. I wanted to ask what exactly they needed to check that required 4 months of clearance, but I didn't. I just said, "Okay, let me know if you need the details again." She replied, "We'll see what we can do," Maddie, in that tone she always used when she was trying to sound neutral but couldn't hide the underlying disapproval. That night, I sat on the couch staring at the RSVP dashboard on my laptop. All of Ethan's relatives had responded. All of our friends from work. Even a few former professors. Everyone but them. Ethan walked in with 2 cups of tea and handed me one without saying a word. He sat beside me watching me click through the guest list. "They're not coming," I finally said. He didn't argue. He just took a sip and said, "I know." I tried to act indifferent. Told myself it was fine, that their absence meant less stress, less judgment. But that little voice in the back of my mind, the one that still wanted to be chosen, kept whispering. Maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe they'll show up last minute. We sent out a reminder email in July. My parents opened it. Again, I saw the timestamp. Again, no reply. Linda helped me pick out centerpieces the following weekend. We were sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by flower samples when she asked if my parents had confirmed. "Not yet," I said, reaching for a sprig of eucalyptus. "I doubt they will." She hesitated, then said gently, "I just want you to know, sweetheart, if they don't come, you'll still have a family there." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't want to cry over them. Not again. A few days later, I called my dad. Just him. I thought maybe if I spoke to him directly without Mom filtering everything, I'd get something real. He answered after 2 rings. His voice was flat, as if he had been expecting the call but didn't want to take it. "Hey Dad," I said. "Just checking in. Did you and Mom get the invitation?" "We did," he said. "I think your mom responded already." "She hadn't. We're still figuring out the schedule," he added. "Dad, it's been over a month." There was silence. Then he said, "You know how things are. It's been a hectic year." I paused. Hectic with what? He didn't answer directly. Just said, "We'll let you know." "Okay," I said, "Sure," and hung up. It wasn't hectic, it was avoidance. They were dodging my wedding the same way they dodged every important moment in my life. And I was done pretending I didn't see it. Ethan and I finished the seating chart without them. We left their seats in the front row empty, partly out of hope, mostly out of stubbornness. Part of me thought, if they show up, at least they'll have a place to sit. The other part thought, let them see what it looks like when their absence is impossible to ignore. The closer we got to the big day, the more surreal it felt. Sabrina posted a picture from a bridal boutique on her Instagram in late August, captioned, "Just for fun. For now." My mother commented with heart emojis and the words "can't wait for the real thing." She had never commented on any of my posts. Not even the engagement announcement. That was the moment I stopped hoping. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. There was no mix-up. No confusion. No scheduling conflict. They had made a choice. Not just to skip my wedding, to protest it, to pretend it wasn't happening. To stand behind Sabrina not because she was getting married, but because I was. And I was going first. I didn't expect a parade, but I thought I might at least get a phone call. Instead, there was silence. A silence so sharp and deliberate that it didn't feel passive, it felt like punishment. It wasn't absence by accident, it was absence by design. For a few days after the wedding, I convinced myself I didn't need to reach out. That I didn't owe anyone an explanation or another chance to justify what they'd done. But when Ethan and I returned from our short honeymoon in Oregon, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table one afternoon staring at the wedding photo we had framed above the stove. It was a candid shot, me and Ethan laughing during the vows, a gust of wind catching the veil in my hair. My cheeks flushed, eyes shining. It should have been a perfect memory. But I kept thinking about those empty chairs in the front row. About the way my chest had tightened every time I glanced toward them. And I realized the silence wasn't helping. Not anymore. So I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered after the second ring, her voice just as breezy and pleasant as ever. "Hi, sweetie. Been meaning to call. How was the big day?" I blinked. "The big day. It was lovely," I said flatly. "But you already knew that." There was a pause, a shift in tone. "Well, we didn't really get to be a part of it, did we?" I closed my eyes and braced myself. "I invited you. Multiple times. Madeline, we never got anything. Not a real invitation. Not a proper one. I mean a paperless post. That hardly counts. You got both, Mom." I saw the read receipt on the email. I paid for certified mail and checked the delivery records. "You signed for it." She hesitated, and I imagined her sitting at the counter in the kitchen, probably twisting the corner of a napkin like she did whenever she was caught off guard. "I don't know what to say. Maybe your father misplaced it. You both opened the digital version. I have the timestamp. You read it the same evening I sent it." Madeline, her voice turned sharper. "You don't have to be defensive. I'm just saying it would have been nice to be included properly. To be part of the planning. You chose to shut us out." "That's not true. Isn't it? You didn't ask me to help pick your dress. You didn't ask about family traditions or include us in any real way. You only contacted us when the logistics were already done. Because every time I brought up the wedding, you changed the subject. You sent me pictures of Sabrina in gowns she hadn't even bought. You said my dress was practical. That my venue was simple. You weren't interested. Well, maybe if you'd taken better care of yourself, we would have been more involved. You never looked comfortable in those fittings. It felt like you didn't want us there." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "I wanted you there," I said, my voice steady now. "But you didn't want to be there unless Sabrina was the one walking down the aisle." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you show up? Why didn't you even send a message? A card, anything?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said it. "We just always assumed Sabrina would be the first bride in the family." The words settled into the air like dust. Ethan was standing in the doorway, frozen with a mug in his hand. He didn't move. Neither did I. "I see," I said. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't hurt feelings or poor communication. It was something much colder. They didn't come because I disrupted the story they'd written in their heads. Because their golden daughter, their centerpiece, hadn't gone first. Because I had dared to be happy to be loved before she had. "That's why you ignored me, because I got married before Sabrina." "We weren't prepared for that," my mother said quietly. "Prepared? You weren't prepared to be happy for me. You didn't give us a chance to process it." You had almost a year. She didn't answer. I looked over at Ethan, who was still standing there, his jaw tense. He crossed the room and sat beside me, gently placing his hand on my leg under the table. I always tried, I said into the phone. I tried so hard to be enough. I joined clubs you recommended. Took classes you liked. I even tried modeling that one summer, remember? Just so you'd notice me the way you always noticed her. Don't be dramatic, Maddie. I'm not. I'm being honest. You made me feel like I was always falling short. And when I finally found someone who saw me, who loved me as I am, you couldn't celebrate with me because it didn't fit the timeline you wanted. You're twisting everything, she snapped. You're trying to make us the villains. I'm not trying to make you anything. I'm just done pretending. We sat in silence for a long beat. Then she said, maybe you're just upset that Sabrina's wedding will be a little more grand. And now you're lashing out. This has nothing to do with her wedding. This has to do with mine. She huffed through the phone. I could picture her lips pursed, arms crossed. Well, you've made your point. If you want to keep blaming us for your hurt feelings, go ahead. I don't need to blame anyone, I said. I just needed to hear you say it. Ethan gently reached over and pressed the end call button. I sat there for a moment, feeling everything and nothing all at once. The tears that came weren't frantic or bitter. They were soft, quiet. Like something loosening inside me after being clenched for years. Ethan pulled my chair toward him and wrapped his arms around me. You did the right thing, he said. I know. They won't change. I nodded. But I don't need them to. And I meant it. For the first time, I wasn't hoping for a better version of them. I was finally grieving the version I had never had. The drive to my parents' house in Bellevue felt different this time. Not because the roads had changed or the trees looked unfamiliar, but because I wasn't heading there as a daughter searching for approval. I wasn't hoping to fix things. I was going because I needed to say what had been sitting in my chest for far too long. Ethan offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. He walked me to the car, kissed my forehead, and said, just remember, you're not that little girl anymore. You don't need to prove anything. The house looked the same. White siding, manicured lawn, Sabrina's framed photo still visible through the front window hanging above the fireplace like some kind of family crest. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the familiar scent of roses and clean concrete. Then I rang the bell. My mother opened the door. She was wearing a cardigan draped around her shoulders, her hair perfectly styled like always. Her eyes flickered with something surprised hesitation, but her voice was neutral. Madeline. I wasn't expecting you. I know, I said. Can I come in? She stepped aside and I walked into the foyer where the same ceramic vase I broke when I was 10 still stood repaired and flawless on the outside, cracks invisible unless you looked closely. My father was in the living room reading a newspaper like it was still 1998. He looked up when I walked in but didn't stand. You're here, he said flatly. I nodded. I won't stay long. My mother followed me into the room, arms crossed. What is this about? I turned to face them both, feeling my hands tremble slightly. I didn't want to cry. I had promised myself I wouldn't. I just wanted to say what I should have said years ago. My mom rolled her eyes and sat down. Here we go. I stayed standing. Yes, I'm jealous, I said. Not of her job. Not of her looks. Not even of the attention she gets. Then what? My father asked, voice tired. I'm jealous of how easy it was for you to love her. My mother scoffed. You're being dramatic. You've always been dramatic. Always playing the victim. I shook my head. I'm not playing anything. I've been silent for so long and it didn't change a thing. So now I'm speaking. She stood, face tightening. We've done nothing but support you. You're the one who chose to distance yourself. Support, I asked. Is that what you call telling me to lose weight for my wedding photos, or skipping my award ceremony to go to Sabrina's photo shoot, or pretending you didn't get my wedding invitation because I dared to get married before she did? My father folded his paper with precision and placed it on the table. Maybe we should stop pretending to be a family then. The words hit like ice. Not shouted, not angry, just plain and final. I felt my breath catch. For a moment, I thought I might lose it. But then something shifted inside me. Instead of collapsing, I stood taller. You already stopped pretending a long time ago. I'm just finally catching up. My mother opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. No more gaslighting, no more rewriting history. You raised me to believe I wasn't enough, that no matter what I did, I'd never be her. And I spent years trying to earn your love like it was something I had to audition for. You're twisting this, she said, her voice rising. I'm not. I'm reclaiming it. I looked around the room one last time. The fireplace, the photo, the perfect cushions arranged with surgical care. Everything still in place as if time had never moved. But I had. And I'm not sorry, I said. I'm not sorry I got married first. I'm not sorry I stopped trying. I'm not sorry I chose peace over performance. I turned and walked toward the door. As I opened it, I heard my father's voice behind me, low and cold. Don't come crying back when things fall apart. I looked over my shoulder. That's the difference. I don't fall apart anymore. And with that, I stepped outside, letting the door close softly behind me. The air felt different. Cleaner. Like I had left something toxic behind. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't replay the conversation or second-guess my words. I just drove windows down, letting the wind wash away the last of it. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan was waiting on the porch. He stood when he saw me and walked over as I got out of the car. How did it go? He asked. I smiled. I said everything I needed to say. And I'm free. He pulled me into a hug, resting his chin on my head as I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. I wasn't the broken one. I was just the quiet one. And now finally, I wasn't quiet anymore. The message came 2 days later, just after I got home from work. I had barely kicked off my shoes when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The preview showed Sabrina's name, and for a moment I just stared at it. I hadn't heard from her directly since before the wedding. She had stayed silent, letting our parents do the distancing, the dodging, the rewriting. So the sudden burst of contact didn't feel like reconciliation. It felt like a storm front. I opened the message out of pure curiosity. You're ruining everything, it said. Just because your wedding didn't go the way you wanted doesn't mean you have to make the rest of us miserable. This family was fine before you decided to make it all about you. I read it twice, letting the words sink in. There was no mention of my name, no hint of empathy or even curiosity. Just accusation. Projection. The same old language Sabrina had always used when someone dared to stand where she expected a spotlight to land. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number. One clean tap and silence. I stood there for a few minutes, breathing slowly, watching the light from the setting sun creep across the kitchen tiles. There was no lump in my throat, no sting in my chest. Just calm. Later that evening, Ethan and I were sitting on the back porch sharing a plate of grilled cheese and tomato soup, watching the sky shift from orange to indigo. He glanced at his phone, then let out a low whistle. You're not going to believe who just texted me, he said. Let me guess, I said. Sabrina. He turned the screen toward me. It was a long message, starting with a thin layer of politeness. As Rebecca's sister and someone who cares deeply about our family's reputation, I feel I need to speak with you directly. That line alone made me snort into my soup. She went on to say that I was going through a difficult emotional time and that perhaps Ethan, as my husband, should take a more proactive role in guiding me towards stability. She said I was clearly lashing out due to unresolved jealousy and insecurity. She wrote, someone like Rebecca has always struggled to manage her emotions. I worry she's now dragging you into unnecessary conflict which could hurt both your futures. The most absurd part came at the end. Surely you understand, as someone smart and career-minded, how important it is to maintain strong relationships with influential family members. I'd hate for Rebecca's choices to harm your professional standing. I blinked at the screen. Did she just try to bribe you with herself? Ethan grinned. She really doesn't know me at all, does she? What did you say? He opened his sent messages and handed me the phone. I read his reply. Thanks for your concern about Rebecca's well-being. As her husband, I fully support her. I suggest you focus on your own wedding and direct any future comments to Rebecca. Short. Direct. Perfect. I handed him back the phone and leaned my head on his shoulder. I think I'm supposed to be offended, but I honestly just feel tired. He nodded. She's scrambling. You stepped out of your assigned role and it's shaking her world. I knew he was right. Sabrina had always controlled the narrative. When we were kids, she rewrote every conflict in her favor, then made me look petty for protesting. When we were teenagers, she would charm teachers and parents while whispering half-truths to my friends until I was suddenly the one being avoided. And I had let it happen. I let her steer the story because speaking up felt like throwing pebbles at a train. But this time she had tried to reach past me and manipulate the one person she couldn't control. That made her frantic. And that made her reckless. The next day, she sent one last message, this time to Ethan again. Don't say I didn't try. When this all falls apart, you'll remember I reached out. He didn't reply. I didn't need him to. Instead, I printed out the exchange and tucked it into the back of my journal. Not out of spite, just as a reminder. Of how far I'd come. Of how little power she held over me now. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself or prove her wrong. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel small. I felt free. Later that night, while folding laundry, I suddenly burst out laughing. Ethan poked his head in from the hallway. What's so funny? She really thought she could win you over with networking. He laughed too, shaking his head. It's impressive in a twisted kind of way. I folded another towel, smiling to myself. You know what? I actually feel sorry for her. Why? Because she still thinks she has to perform to matter. And I used to know exactly what that felt like. He stepped into the room and kissed the top of my head. You don't live there anymore. No, I said. I really don't. It had been quiet for almost a week when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but the area code was familiar. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came in. Maddie, it's Janice. I know I haven't said much before, but I'd like to talk. Call me when you can. Aunt Janice had always been the kind of person who stayed out of things. She was my mother's older sister, calm and composed, the kind who kept family holidays running smoothly with warm casseroles and safer conversations. She never interfered. She never picked sides. But something had changed. When I called her back, she answered on the first ring. Thank you for calling, she said. I wasn't sure if you would. I'm here, I replied, cautious but curious. I've been watching this unfold for too long, she said. And I've held my tongue. But after what your mother said last weekend, I can't anymore. What happened? She told people you deliberately excluded them from your wedding. That you're telling lies to get attention. She said you're unstable, Maddie. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. I don't believe her, Janice said. And I won't keep quiet this time. There was a pause. I'm hosting the family brunch next Sunday. Your parents will be there. So will most of the family. I'm going to say something, out loud. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. I know I don't. But I want to. She didn't wait for my approval. She was already resolved. That weekend, Ethan and I made plans to go hiking. I didn't want to sit by my phone waiting for fallout, but the updates still found their way to me. Around noon, I got a text from my cousin Emily. You're not going to believe what just happened. Then a short video clip. Janice stood near the buffet table in her backyard, a glass of lemonade in one hand, her voice steady. People were chatting quietly around her, but as she spoke, the noise died. Before we all get back to food and small talk, she said, I just want to clear the air on something that's been bothering me. My father was visible in the background, standing stiffly with a paper plate in hand. My mother sat beside Sabrina near the patio, lips tight. It's no secret that Madeline's wedding caused some tension, Janice continued, but it wasn't because she did something wrong. It was because certain people in this family made a choice to ignore her, to silence her, and then to lie about it. A murmur rippled through the group. She deserved better, we all saw it. We just didn't say anything. And that stops today. The camera panned briefly to Sabrina, whose expression had hardened into something almost unreadable. Then it cut off. A few minutes later, Emily texted again. Uncle Ray just said he's backing out of officiating Sabrina's wedding. Said it's not the environment he wants to be part of. Then, another message. You should know the boutique your mom booked for Sabrina's gown just canceled their fittings, claimed a scheduling issue, but they've always been loyal to Janice. People are stepping back. I didn't know what to feel. Vindication, relief, grief. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the messages, my phone buzzing every few minutes with new updates. Apparently another cousin who had agreed to be a bridesmaid had texted Sabrina later that day to say she no longer felt comfortable standing beside her. That the way my parents had treated me had left a bitter taste. One by one people were shifting. Not because I asked them to, not because I made a scene, but because they were seeing it. Really seeing it. By Sunday night my parents had started calling around, not to apologize, to explain. They told people it was all a misunderstanding, that the invitations were never received. That I had been cold and distant for years and they didn't know how to approach me anymore. But the cracks were already showing. One aunt told Janice that my mother had called and cried asking why she would humiliate her like that in front of everyone. And Janice had replied, maybe because it was the only way to make you listen. I sat at the kitchen table that evening watching Ethan chop vegetables while I read the texts out loud. He didn't interrupt. Just kept cutting slowly, letting the sound of the knife on the board fill the silence. Finally, he said, you never needed to convince anyone. They were always going to see it eventually. It was just a matter of who would speak up first. I nodded. Janice's voice had cracked something open. Not just in the family, in me. Because for the first time someone who had stayed silent for years had looked at the mess and said, enough. And the silence broke. The weight didn't leave overnight. But something shifted. It wasn't just my voice anymore. It was a ripple. And I wasn't alone. It's strange how the truth has a way of finding its voice even when you stop speaking. A few days after the cookout, I got a message from Claire, a woman I used to work with back at the firm in Redmond. We weren't close, just friendly enough to grab coffee during team offsites. She was the kind of person who stayed out of drama, so seeing her name pop up in my inbox took me by surprise. Hey, hope it's okay to reach out, she wrote. This is kind of awkward, but I thought you should know my Aunt Jeanette got a call from your mom. I paused, already feeling my stomach tighten. She said some things. About your mental health. That you've been unstable lately. That people shouldn't get involved or believe what you've been saying about the family. I'm so sorry. It felt wrong the moment I heard it. I reread the message twice, then a third time. My mother had started calling people outside the family now, not just cousins or aunts. Not even people I had spoken to recently, just anyone she thought might listen, anyone she could reach. Ethan found me standing by the kitchen sink, phone still in my hand. What's wrong? I passed the phone to him. He read the message, his expression growing colder with each line. She's calling your former colleagues now, I nodded. It wasn't even disbelief anymore. Just exhaustion. That's slander, Maddie. Defamation. If she says anything like this to someone at your new job, I know. We can talk to a lawyer. I shook my head. I don't want to go down that road. It's not worth it. I'm not trying to burn the whole house down. I just want out of it. He nodded, though his jaw remained tight. The next day, another message came in. This time from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 8 years. Kelsey. We were roommates for 2 semesters in college, thick as thieves for a while. She had been there when I got my first internship, helped me study for finals, held my hair back after too many drinks. But sometime after graduation, when my family drama started bleeding into adult life, she distanced herself. We lost touch. Or maybe she just drifted to where it was quieter. Her message was short. Hey. I've been hearing things, some from your mom, honestly. I believed a lot of it. But I shouldn't have. I see it now. You were never the problem. I'm sorry. I stared at her words for a long time. I didn't feel the urge to write back. Not because I was angry, but because I understood. Sometimes the lies are just more convenient to believe until they're not. That same week, Emily forwarded a screenshot from the family group chat. Apparently my mom had started calling around again this time, trying to regain lost ground. She called Uncle Jerry and said she thought I'd been emotionally fragile since high school. That she and my dad had done their best, but I was difficult. That everything happening now was just another dramatic episode. That people shouldn't be quick to judge, but people weren't buying it anymore. Jerry's wife, Aunt Lena, had texted Janice afterward. She sounded desperate. It wasn't concern, it was control. Word kept spreading. Quietly, then quickly. A distant cousin who had once taken Sabrina's side sent me a message on Instagram out of the blue. I always thought you were just private, reserved. I didn't realize you were being silenced. Then another. I wish I'd asked your side sooner. I believed the version that made sense for them. I didn't realize they were building it on your back. It was like watching a mask fall off piece by piece. Every time my parents tried to patch their image, they tore open a new seam. At one point, Emily told me that the boutique where Sabrina had ordered her second bridal fitting suddenly became fully booked through the rest of summer. The manager, apparently a friend of Janice's, had heard enough. Sabrina was livid, of course. But she didn't call me directly. She posted vague quotes on social media instead. Things like jealousy ruins everything and some people can't stand to see others shine. Her followers, mostly curated from her marketing career, chimed in with likes and affirmations, but behind-the-scenes support was thinning. Uncle Ray, who had once been set to officiate her wedding, told her he wouldn't feel comfortable participating unless the family mended things. And from what I heard, that didn't go over well. I didn't have to lift a finger. I wasn't writing posts. I wasn't explaining myself anymore. I had simply stopped pretending. The rest was happening on its own. That weekend, Ethan and I went out for breakfast at our usual spot downtown. The place with creaky wood floors and giant cinnamon rolls you had to share. As we were waiting for our check, I scrolled through my texts and saw one more message. From my old mentor at my first job, Linda Hirsch. Hi Madeline. Just wanted to say I ran into your mom recently at a fundraiser. She said some concerning things about you. I smiled politely, but inside I was fuming. I know who you are. I've seen your work. Don't let anyone rewrite that. I looked across the table at Ethan. The thing I never expected is happening, I said. What people are seeing the truth without me having to defend it. He smiled. You stopped letting them write the script. So now they don't know what to say. I thought about that. About all the years I spent trying to explain, to fix, to be reasonable. How many apologies I gave just to keep the peace. Not anymore. Let the silence speak, let the mask crack, and let the truth walk itself from door to door. I got the call on a Wednesday afternoon just as I was leaving a client meeting in Bellevue. The name on the screen made me stop in the parking lot. Malcolm Foster. He had been a close friend of my dad's for years. Retired now, but once one of the most respected estate attorneys in King County. I hadn't heard from him in ages, not since he gave a toast at my high school graduation party back when things still felt hopeful. Madeline, he said when I picked up, his voice low but steady. I hope this isn't a bad time. I just found something and I thought you deserved to know. I leaned against my car, keys in hand. Go ahead. Last week I was helping a colleague review some older estate documents from your parents' file, routine stuff, just organizing for updates. I came across an earlier draft of their will from about 4 years ago. You were listed clearly. Equal share. No conditions. I felt something settle in my chest. Okay. But the version I saw filed last month, you're no longer in it. The words landed like cold water down my spine. Removed completely. Yes. Sabrina is the sole beneficiary. I don't know what happened, but I wanted you to hear it from someone who knew you both. Someone neutral. Thank you, I said. Truly. It wasn't about the money, it never was. I didn't grow up expecting inheritance or family wealth. What hurt was the deliberateness of it. The erasure. The quiet replacement of my name with hers. Not even a partial division, just gone. That night, I sat on the porch with Ethan and told him everything. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he looked at me and asked, Did they ever ask you to sign anything? Actually, yes. It came back suddenly. Last summer. A strange afternoon at their house when my mom asked me to sign a few documents. Said it was about temporary property designation because of some refinancing process on their house. I remember hesitating, asking if I should have someone review it. She had laughed. Said it was just standard paperwork. That it had nothing to do with me long term. I signed it without reading closely. I trusted her. Or maybe I just didn't want another fight. Now I sat in the fading light realizing I had handed them the pen and let them write me out of the story. "Do you want to fight it?" Ethan asked. "No," I said. "But I want to stop pretending I ever meant something to them. I clearly didn't." I called Aunt Janice that weekend and told her what Malcolm said. Her reaction was quiet, but her silence said everything. After a long pause, she whispered, "They didn't just fail to protect you, they erased you." I could hear her voice shaking. Not from surprise, but from sorrow. She had seen it coming, maybe even known it deep down. But now there was proof. Legal, intentional proof. A few days later, word started to spread again. Not from me, but through the same slow-moving river of conversation that had carried every other truth. One cousin messaged me to say her family would not be attending Sabrina's rehearsal dinner. Another canceled their RSVP altogether. "It's not about the money," she wrote. "It's about the message." Then the florist Sabrina had chosen for the ceremony, who also happened to be married to a cousin of Janice, backed out of the contract. Claimed family conflict made it too complicated. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I barely even responded. But the wedding that had been planned to be flawless was now unraveling thread by thread. And my parents. They started damage control. Again. My mother texted a cousin to say I had misunderstood the will, that it was a draft, not the final version. My father called an uncle and claimed I had refused any financial ties, that it was my choice to distance myself. But no one was buying it anymore. The pattern was too clear. Years of silence, years of favoritism. And now an erasure so blatant it couldn't be rewritten with polite excuses. That week I received one final message from someone I hadn't heard from since childhood. A friend of the family. She said, "I used to think your parents were just strict. Now I see they were carefully curating which daughter got to exist." I didn't cry, I felt seen. Because what was being revealed wasn't just favoritism. It was a decision. A system. A rewriting of the family image, and I had simply been written out. But I had learned something. You can be erased from paper, you can be removed from photographs. But when people start telling the truth, your name finds its way back. And this time it was being spoken by people who had once been silent. The week of Sabrina's wedding came quietly, with no fanfare, no filtered photos flooding social media, no countdown posts, no hashtag campaigns like I had once expected. It was strange to see silence where there had always been noise. But then again, maybe the silence had always been there, buried under glitter and performance, finally exposed now that the spotlight had shifted. Emily told me the venue changed at the last minute. Something about contracts falling through. A few guests pulled out entirely, claiming scheduling conflicts. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. On the morning of the ceremony, Ethan and I sat out on the back porch. It was early spring, warm enough to ditch jackets, but still crisp enough to enjoy a blanket over our knees. He brought me coffee in the mug. I always used the one with the chip on the handle that never quite touched my lips. The backyard was quiet. Our dog lay curled at our feet, the birds chirping in the trees overhead. It was the first Saturday in months that felt still. Ethan nudged my arm gently. "You okay?" I looked out at the yard. The trees were beginning to bud, small flashes of green, reminding me that change never announces itself loudly. It just begins quietly, without permission. "Do you miss them?" he asked. The question hung in the air like mist. I thought about birthdays with polite texts and no calls. About graduation dinners cut short for photo shoots. About the blank space where a father-daughter dance should have been. About the empty chairs, the unopened invitations, the silence louder than any outburst. Then I thought about Aunt Janice. About the messages from cousins, from coworkers, from people I thought had forgotten me. I thought about the way Ethan held space for me, never pushing, never flinching, even when the pieces came undone. About the way my name had found its way back without me shouting it into every room. I shook my head slowly. Number, I'm finally free. He reached for my hand and squeezed it once. We sat there for a while, not needing to say anything else. Later that afternoon, I took out a small box from the closet. Inside were old family photos, the kind that used to make my chest ache. One showed me at 12 holding a trophy from the state robotics competition. I remembered that day vividly, not because of the win, but because my parents had left early to take Sabrina to a modeling callback. I used to look at that picture and only see what was missing. Now I saw something else. I saw a girl who tried anyway. Who showed up even when no one was watching. Who built her own joy out of scraps of disappointment and made something solid out of it. I wasn't her anymore. But I was proud of her. I slipped the photo back into the box, closed it gently, and returned it to the shelf. There was no part of me that wanted revenge anymore. No part that needed to be chosen first or given a crown I had spent too long chasing. I had already chosen myself. And in doing so, I had found a kind of peace I never thought possible. That night, as Ethan and I made dinner together, he turned to me suddenly. You know what I think? What I think the real wedding happened here. With the right people. With no forced smiles, just truth. I smiled. Yeah, it did. And it was perfect. If you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me through this story. If you've ever felt like the background character in your own family or been made to feel small in rooms you helped build, I want you to know you're not alone. You matter even when they don't say it. Especially then. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've been through something similar or just want to share your own story, this is your space too. And if you haven't yet, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this, real, raw, and full of the unexpected, coming soon. Until then, thank you for listening.